Right. As a brief recap of the previous session, you all received information from this anonymous source that the Cainite Anophnamtet, whom carries a blood hunt, is supposedly in refuge with the Anarch Revolt at the Isle of Man to the north. And Judith also learned that through a combination of efforts by her own sire and another Ventru, Mordecai, her sire has been revealed to at least the prince and the sheriff. And the Seneschal Genevieve Silvers was executed for treason, Judith being spared for her use in hunting down the Anarchs. And the new Seneschal, Mordecai Benjamin, has become Judith's de facto handler. I would like to get an idea of what people's plans are now that we're in the aftermath of all of this. In the next couple 2 to 4 weeks, as we're entering now January of 1456. So I'd like to hear what people's ideas of what they want to do or get going on. But we will start with Elined.
Let's see. From the sounds of it, at least one of them is going to the island, correct? Should Judith's methods not go through, she has intentions of going to the prince and amassing some amount of forces so it can be, well, taken by force if need be.
Alright, so you're tentatively planning an invasion of the Isle of Man, depending on what Judith decides to do?
More, if her plan goes south, we have plan B.
And what are Judith's plans the next couple weeks?
That is an excellent question.
Want me to come back to you?
Yeah, please.
Okay. How about Nicholas?
Since Nicholas is an outsider in London, he doesn't really have any immediate plan. So he might find a subject or two on which to work his research. But other than that, he's there for quote-unquote emotional support.
All right.
Or anything the others might need.
What kind of subjects and what kind of research would you like to do? Or begin?
The anatomical kind. The usually unwilling subject kind.
Alright. And you are currently staying in the Chamberlain Manor?
Yes, although he would like to find a place where he can work privately.
Alright, you will learn in the coming nights quite quickly that it seems like there's a shift in domain. It's unclear exactly whose it was, but now it's definitely in the hands of a Ventru by the name of Mordecai Benjamin, who has recently been appointed Seneschal. There's been no explanation of... there's explanation that Genevieve Silvers has been relieved of her position, and it's been left very vague, and no one's seen her in nights. So the new Seneschal has taken this domain and is willing to let you stay there in exchange for a minor boon, but if your plans are to find something more private, then it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. He has no interest in being under the scrutiny of Camarilla Lapdog. He will ask Judith if she knows of anywhere that he can work privately, and that she's not to ask too many questions. But that he will give her a minor boon at least, because he knows her better.
Alright, we turn back to Judith.
There might be a vacant Chamberlain warehouse that could be made available. Question mark.
Maybe not vacant. I would say there are Chamberlain warehouses that are definitely in use because you saved the business under your guidance. The House Chamberlain's commercial enterprises are still surviving and they're still in use. So warehouses exist, but they're not vacant.
Could a alcove be made available that would leave him undisturbed in one said warehouse?
Like partitioning off a few aisles, or
Something like that.
it wouldn't be underground, and wouldn't really know what happens during the day. It would be private, but perhaps insecure, I think.
The only other place I could think would be Edmonton, but it's still actively under construction.
Does Judith relay to Nicholas these concerns?
Yeah.
And he will seek to perhaps hire a place for a little while, just until they decide to leave.
Sure. What did you have in mind, Nicholas?
Something with a basement. Somewhere that he can sleep and work privately.
Let's see. Let me look at your sheet really quickly. Alright, you've got some resources, so you've got some coin to spare. I will say that after digging around, if you ask enough and look around enough, you would probably eventually find one of the gentry is a little bit hard on the times right now and isn't able to bring in the coin he used to. Kind of perhaps some of the fallout of the war bringing uncertainty to the mercantile business, making his income more uncertain and unstable. So for the exchange of some silver, he's willing to let you use and basically sleep in the basement of his manor house, which is quite large and empty. And you notice he doesn't have like a wife or children. He's getting into his 40s, so he's getting a bit old to be a bachelor aristocrat. He seems not to have gotten any money from any marriages, so you think it's really just if you can help him out financially, he's willing to let some kind of barber or physician or whatever he thinks you are stay in the basement out of sight.
And Nicholas's full intention is, of course, to open up for business for a short while as well, should anyone need his services for bloodletting, headaches, things of that nature.
Alright, and the next part of your plan was to find some subjects?
Yes. He's going to test the room to make sure that screams cannot be heard too readily above.
How do you test that, out of curiosity?
So, he is actually going to find someone he can take down there and dominate, and simply tell them to scream for a little while he goes upstairs.
Alright, when you get upstairs, it's very quiet, and fortunately on this night, the aristocrat that you're kind of leasing out this space from is not at home. He'll be gone for a about a week, and you can hear a faint, muffled sound if everything is quiet. If there was moderate conversation, it probably wouldn't be noticed, but if someone was sitting in the salon and just waiting, they could probably hear it.
He's satisfied nonetheless. He'll just have to keep his word quiet. And he will release this person that he's dominated. He doesn't intend to keep them for his experiments, and he'll give them a little bit of silver to keep quiet.
All right. What kind of subjects are you looking for in particular?
He's mostly looking for people who won't be missed. His current focus in his research is the effects of fear on the taste of vitae.
Interesting. Well, of course you would know the people who wouldn't be missed would be street urchin children, the beggars and the homeless, lepers, of which mostly congregate around the hospitals. Those are your best bets in the city.
And those are the kind of people he will seek to abduct. Now, he's not being so overt as to draw, to create a scene with the local guards. He will only abduct maybe one person a week. Just in case.
Sure. We'll take a perception stealth or a wit stealth. Difficulty 7. Alright, 3 successes. You're successful in this first week you're here in this basement, and you have some time to iron out some of the logistical challenges once you do abduct this, you think, homeless boy. He's maybe 11 years old. You think you caught him in the middle of pickpocketing someone when you managed to corner him in an alley. Describe how Nicholas goes about getting him to get down to the basement.
He's not going to be so overt as to dominate him. He wants him to feel a little bit of fear, something that he can work with. So he will attempt to manipulate him with promises of food and comfortable bed. Doing his best to appear not, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, not too creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hard because he has those weird eyes.
Yeah, I will take a manipulation subterfuge, standard difficulty here. As you lure children into dark alleys, away from prying eyes. 2 successes. It's enough, even for a wily street urchin. You bring him in. Go ahead and describe him.
Describe the kid?
Describe kind of how this goes.
He watches the kid for a bit as he goes about his pickpocketing activities, and makes a point to follow him quietly for a while before accidentally bumping into him, and pretending to show concern for his current state of affairs. He tells him that he's a wealthy nobleman who's trying to look after the urchins of London, and that he can offer him food and a bed for a few nights in exchange for a little bit of light work.
This seems to play right into your hand, and the street urchin boy follows you readily down into the basement of this certainly legitimate-looking, fine manor house you have. So you have this boy down in the basement.
Is he able to procure some food? Perhaps even if he has to steal it from the manor house?
Absolutely. The manor house is well enough stocked. They have a fine larder and There's food here, definitely. Better food than I think most common folk in London are gonna have.
And he'll put the boy at ease by feeding him, allowing him to comb his hair, perhaps take a bath.
You bring him some cheese and bread slices, and some apples, which is gourmet for him. And he is able to bathe, perhaps for the first time in weeks, from what you think.
Nicholas's motivations are selfish. He doesn't want to smell him.
He starts to fall asleep after he's done eating, finally having some relaxation after, you think, probably years of hardship in the streets of London, surviving on his own, never knowing where he's going to sleep or eat. He finally has this break that you've given him, and he lets his guard down and begins to fall asleep.
To his eternal despair, Nicholas will pick him up while he's sleeping, or half asleep, and tie him into a chair.
He starts to wake up and still very drowsy. He gets very confused and asking you what's happening and why is he in a chair.
Nicholas will kneel down next to him, looking him in the eyes, his own pools of deep, unfathomable madness. "I'm going to hurt you very badly," he tells him.
The boy's eyes light up with fear and pupils dilate as he seems to realize he's been had, and he tries fruitlessly to free himself from the chair. He starts shouting. Of course, you know how far that gets now.
Nicholas smiles as he stands, and continues smiling as he backs into the darkness and vanishes from the boy's sight. But he continues talking to him. "Are you afraid, child?"
The boy's sobbing. He is almost... It's almost unclear what he's even saying through the sobs and the snot, looking around him fearfully. He can't exactly see you. He can't turn all the way around from his chair.
Nicholas will grab a scalpel from his bag, laying on a table in the shadows there. And he'll move around behind the child.
He continues to plead to the darkness and then shouts out, hoping that someone will come and find him.
From behind, Nicholas appears and slices his cheek deeply into the subcutaneous tissue.
The boy yells, shrieking, more as much out of surprise as pain, as the flesh from his cheek is peeled off.
Nicholas comes out in front of him again and leans down once more, although this time, when his lips peel back in the smile, they're ever the more white with the flash of fangs. "Are you afraid?"
I'm afraid. Please let me go. I don't. And now that you're close to him, you can smell the stain of urine, and you can see where he's begun to piss himself, starting
Excellent.
to leak onto the floor.
He'll take a couple vials and collect blood from the boy's cheek.
He squirms, but you collect it.
That will be all for our first night. And using his powers of dementation, he's going to dull this boy's fear to nearly nothing. It won't do rather having him die of a heart attack before he's finished.
Alright, this boy's willpower is faint enough compared to your vampiric mind that there's not going to be a roll required. You're easily able to bend his psyche into submission, into a cold, statuesque frame of moderate fear, calm and quiet. And you leave him kind of panting quickly, with his face red and his eyes red, tears stained all over. He's just quietly panting and staring at you, wide-eyed.
And that is where he will leave him for the remainder of the night and the day. He intends to do other things in the coming nights.
Alright. And you leave him there. Fortunately, you know you have at least a few more nights before the man of this house, the aristocrat who owns it, is supposed to be back. With that, we will look back at Judith. You thought any more about your plans?
The first thing I want to do is check up with Gautier, see if he's responded or come to answer in person, what have
you. Have not gotten a message back, nor heard any news of Gautier showing up in person.
We'll just assume he's dead then. Would I have heard through the grapevine at all whether or not any word about that scene with Ambrose filtered into the rest of common knowledge?
No, you listen actively. It seems as though there's absolutely no word of what transpired there. Of course, the only witnesses were Robert and Elined and the sheriff and the new seneschal. It seems like no one has been sharing this.
They all have a vested interest in not spreading that news. She would set about arranging passage from London to the Isle of Man, but obviously not direct.
Right.
Should probably notify Elined of her plans, just in case she wanted to tag along.
Alright, Elined, you know what Judith's plans are now. How does that impact your
And
plans?
what exactly are your plans once you get there?
Among other things, notifying them that I was found out, and then demanding the right of vengeance.
I myself have been working more on a plan B, should that fail.
As you like. Just felt it appropriate to keep you informed.
Of course.
In the intervening time before the ship set sail, Judith would poke in at Elysium. If only to keep apprised of chatter and goings on amongst the neonates and harp.
The neonates and what? Oh, harpies.
Harpies, yeah.
All right. There is rumor or suspicion that Genevieve was either exiled or executed, given that she disappeared very abruptly and was replaced very abruptly without really any notice or forewarning. And that's given Bella Matea some concern. Look at the rest of this. Spending more time in Elysium, you would note that Mordecai has become more of a draw for small gatherings. He's more of a lightning rod for socialization. There seems to be always a small group around him now that he's seneschal. People are either sucking up or trying to avoid his wrath.
Judith would use what little influence she has with the neonates to urge caution. He can't be trusted. He'll sell you out for the cost of a new pair of shoes. Maybe not exactly those words, but yeah, that intent.
Your influence goes fairly far with the neonates of London, and it definitely does seem to strike home, maybe corroborate their fears that maybe he was somehow part of this power play to replace Genevieve. Some of them think he did it himself. Mordecai does eventually insist that you speak with him privately at the old Chamberlain Manor, though.
Of course he does. Not being one to call down fire from the heavens, she'll show up.
All right.
She's not going to be as surreptitious as normal. She's just going to walk straight in the front door.
You are brought to Mordecai, and when you return to the manor, as it's now been repossessed, you find that there's new staff here, and very quickly new furniture and appointments are being made to re-outfit the manor. As it once was quite barren, it's now becoming filled up again. And in fact, you're brought back to the same study which you spoke to your sire just weeks ago, and you find Mordecai. There you are.
Where else would I be? The Seneschal calls. I answer.
Creating a ruckus, or some other such problems, I'm sure. There are a few things that we should make clear.
And what do you imagine those might be?
I would like to say under no uncertain terms that our prince allows your continued existence for as long as you're useful. For as long as we believe that you will aid the Covenant against this insurgency. And if or when it becomes clear that use is gone, kind of lets that hang as he gestures out to the air.
I didn't expect he had any intention of actually banishing me. Just saying that he had.
Well, that's where it becomes very important that we see eye to eye. You see, if you stay on my good side, that exile will remain true. But if I get it in my mind that you have no intention of aiding myself or the prince, well, I can't very well recommend leniency. Suffice to say, it's in your interest to convince me that you are useful.
And precisely at what point did it enter your mind that this was not already expressly clear?
Well, when I saw that you had returned to Elysium and started talking to some of the younger ones who seemed to be so fond of you.
Do you not think that it would look suspicious if I suddenly became quite overly fond of the incoming seneschal, when previously I had been something of a, how did you put it, ruckus causer?
Kind of folds his arms, looking irritated. There are very few people who know what happened in that Undercroft. The prince has no intention of letting that news go any further than who knows. Thomas Chamberlain died, tragically, against the Lupine menace in the north. And that's how he will stay dead.
Indeed. But there's no reason to raise undue suspicions.
Many people in this city have reason to speak with me. From the lowest fledgling to the Primogen. There's nothing suspicious about having a meeting with the Seneschal.
Not at all. But changing one's demeanor towards a particular office or individual, well, that would be unusual.
That I am less concerned about. What I am more concerned about is finding out everything you know about this Anarch rebellion. Their numbers, their plans, the names involved.
I would be shocked if Ambrose and the rest of the Covenant weren't all already aware of all the same names I am.
Don't get coy, Judith. Remember, you want to stay on my good side.
I wasn't aware I'd gotten there yet.
You are starting in the hole. You've got a ways to go.
They're savvy. They work in cells. No cell leader knows much about what the others are doing at any given moment. I pray you are already aware of the involvement of Jack Timbers and Alan Ellis.
There were rumors, but the confirmation is important.
I was under the impression that Robert DeVere had reported on both of these names, as his word no longer couldn't.
As I said, confirmation is important. Are there any other names? Higher-ups?
Those are the highest up I've personally been aware of. I've not had a chance to speak with Jack, of course. That information comes from Robert.
The Prince of Edinburgh, he vouched for your death. What part does he play?
It seemed an opportune moment to kill the man. I simply happened to save his life in the process.
So he has no affiliation whatsoever with the Sanok Rebellion.
I'm unaware as to his allegiances.
Need a manipulation subterfuge. Standard difficulty. Your specialty does apply.
I was going to say. That bitch.
He narrows his eyes at you. You're being clever with your words. Don't do that around me.
Malcolm McDougal is canny and unpredictable. It would be folly for me to state with a certainty something that could have changed with the breath of a wind. If he feels slighted, even in the most minute amount, it could change his demeanor towards an ally, a friend, completely.
I asked about his affiliation. As of the last time that you spoke.
As I told Ambrose, we had made arrangements for a parley between parties. What took place after that arrangement was made, I am unaware of. Surely a negotiation has taken place by now. Its result, I can't fathom a guess. As I said, he's unpredictable.
Scots usually are. And these Anarchs themselves, they work in cells. Do they have any grand plan?
Grand plan. Overthrowing the Covenant as a whole. Rallying the youngest and the disillusioned to their banner. Sadly, the Covenant is doing little to dissuade those arguments, and a great deal to cement them. Killing seneschals, for example.
You don't have to worry your pretty head about what they cement. This rebellion will be put down. Now, what are the steps this Anarch revolt plans on taking to achieve their goals? What are their targets?
Assuming negotiations with the McDougalls don't fall through, I would expect them to strike a city in the north, thereby utilizing Scotland as a point from which to strike safely. Likely on the Lancaster side of the Isle. York is too strongly defended.
A city, or a city which you know. His eyes narrow again.
She looks thoughtful for a moment. Have maps been brought back into the room at all?
Yes, we'll say so. There's some maps scrawled across the table between the two of you. You still there?
Yeah, sorry.
So there's some maps there.
She's looking over the maps. I can hazard a guess. Perhaps.
I think you can hazard more than a guess.
Really? Which Anarch cell have you been in contact with?
At least one. He kind of gestures out to you.
No. That's adorable. No. They scarcely trust me. If I wanted to show force and make a demonstration and an example, I would probably strike as close to the Scottish border as possible. Alternately, if I wished to take a strategically strong position and cripple the North and its economy, I would start at Newcastle.
You're being very careful of dancing around this subject, Judith. You should be more mindful of dancing around things with me at this point. If you know where they're striking, it is best that you tell me.
Newcastle would have a more blunt impact. It would have a sizable result in reducing trade in the north. It's also the last stop for most trade to Scotland. The Scottish would want to take it in the first place. By taking Newcastle, of course, not only do they win over more support from their Scottish allies, but they gain its wealth. However, they would also draw Ragna's eye. Ragna has no small amount of forces under her sway, which would make Carlisle the more logical place to strike.
He looks down at the map. Carlisle is far from support. Cut off by the Pennines. He nods a couple times.
And Barbaros is a brute with no thought for long-term planning. If he's embroiled in an engagement with Ragna, he will have drawn all support in, and most of the outlying areas will have been marginally defended at best. I also believe that his court has been infiltrated by someone very much like Anaf Nemtet.
The Viceroy of Carlisle?
Tredian Swift. Barbaros's advisor.
And what gives you this idea?
He shares many of the same traits Anaf Nemtet did. He is also unknown, though he claims membership in House Tremere, the Primogen in York. Yves Cavanaugh had no idea his name. Seems odd for someone, a regent, to be unaware of someone in such a high station who happens to be from her very same clan.
The usurpers are a very queer and strange clan and house. I do not attempt to understand all of their hierarchy and social rituals. Very private.
Very well. Are you aware of a venture named Anselmus?
Vaguely.
And... And Kindwolf. You know of him as well.
I believe I do, yes. Something about the relation of how Barbaros and Ragna began their feud.
At a certain age, we all learn about many of our contemporaries. It helps us keep tabs on what those within our bloodline happen to be up to, either so we don't step on one another's toes or so we know who to target. This is the nature of being a Cainite. I doubt very much, even though they'd be very new to the blood, that the Tremere fail in this regard. Tretian Swift, an advisor to a Covenant prince, is unknown to a regent who should be one of his contemporaries, has never heard his name. I find that unusual. And I find even more unusual that Barbaros defers to him in everything. If Anaf Nemtet can worm his way into the council chamber of the entire Covenant and convince them that he is something he is not, a complete and wholly different kind of creature, why could not a younger of his same ilk convince a single man that he is simply a different clan?
I will bring this concern to the prince, although there are many explanations for why this regent would say that she has no knowledge of Tretian Swift. We have enough enemies and problems to deal with before we go and create more. Unfortunately, as things are with the tension and with the Covenant's public support of Ragnar, getting messages and parley to Barbaros has been challenging, to say the least.
Kindwolf, who happens to be Barbaros' brother, believes that Tretian Swift has been poisoning his mind. Of anyone, I would take his word.
I'm sure he's not without his own agendas. In any case, he looks back down at the map and taps it a couple times. I will have word sent to Broga Ironbend and make sure that he is aware of the border.
I'm sure Barbaros will be all too happy to break off a detachment. He might even spare a whole 50 men.
He looks irritated again. I think that will suffice for tonight. Despite prying this information out of you, there is benefit from you cooperating. And so long as you cooperate, you may still hope for that exile. And just so we're also clear, in case you have some plan of reconnecting with your friends in low places or doing away with me, thanks to my old associate, Mr. Ralph Gunsberg, I do have the documentation set in place to alert certain male members of the Chamberlain family of some unreputable actions that have been taken that might bring more attention to you again. should I disappear.
Speaking of friends in low places, there's a certain guest of the Isle of Man I intend on having words with.
And who is this, and when do you intend to return?
Assuming I survive, I intend on seeking my right of vengeance against Anaf Nemtet. His blood is mine, he just doesn't know it yet.
Anaf Nemtet hides in the Isle of Man with the Anarchs.
I said as much to Ambrose. It is the reason, the only reason, I came forward. If they give safe harbor to him, well, you know what happens when I seek vengeance, don't you?
You kill many innocent children. That's what I know.
None of these will be that innocent.
You are more useful working with us, under the idea that you are still working for them. And so, for that, the prince has been gracious enough to allow you leave to return to them. Of the understanding, of course, that if there's any reason to believe that you've once again changed sides, you can forget about the exile, of course. And you will join your friend Anaf Nemtet in his bloodhound status.
It's curious that none of the named leaders of this rebellion have yet been added to that blood hunt. Don't you think?
Curious indeed. Let us hope for both our sakes that you don't make any more mistakes while you rejoin them.
Can I throw perception empathy and see if I pick up if there's a double meaning there? That was an interesting turn of phrase.
Sure. Perception, empathy, standard difficulty. Two successes. You think that when he says he hopes for both our sakes, that he has perhaps a lot of skin in the game if this doesn't work out as well. That he might be next on the chopping block if you report to him and then this goes poorly.
She smirks a little bit. A knowing little coy smile. My dear Benjamin, You almost sound concerned.
That's Mr. Benjamin to you. I have other business to attend to. He kind of gestures, waving you away.
Have you informed the Gauntlet that they'll no longer be welcome here? I had originally intended it as a gift.
What remains of the Gauntlet has resources of their own. They have no need of this mana.
Not in London, they don't.
I am sure Lord Devere and Lady Vasingen will get along just fine.
I hope for your sake they don't lodge a formal complaint with the Covenant against you for putting them out of their lodging.
He looks unamused at you.
She's not joking.
He has a tired and annoyed face. He simply waits quietly for you to leave.
And she'll turn on the heel, then depart.
Alright. You depart from your meeting. And it looks like we have a Robert Devere. Robert, we are going over what people are doing in the next 2 to 4 weeks. And last you heard, you were at the head of a detachment of the personal guard from the Archbishop of Canterbury, which was expecting on leaving within the next fortnight. Probably it's under your command, so they're kind of waiting and assuming they're going to be leaving soon. But that was the idea, was they were going to leave for Canterbury to detain this Louis de Poitiers and revoke the title of the suffragan bishop. So what are your plans in the next 2 to 4 weeks, now that you have been privy to this meeting with Judith, the execution of the old Seneschal Chamberlain, and the knowledge of where Anafnam Tet is hiding? What does Robert do?
Very good question. I don't suppose in the council, Elined seemed surprised at this revelation. Well, not really council, but yeah, audience with the prince.
Mm-hmm. Give me a perception empathy. It's kind of in retrospect.
Okay.
Standard difficulty. Was Elined trying to conceal this expression or lack of expression from Robert?
She was trying to conceal, and she rolled for that with a self-control roll last.
Alright, so we'll take that roll, and you had a willpower put into that, which makes it 2 successes. Alright, Robert, 2 successes. You successfully defended against the lie, implicit, unspoken, that Elined...
Well, specialty and truths?
Yeah, I would say even with 2 successes, it's defender wins, so you would succeed, but with 3 successes, definitely.
Okay.
So, Elined did a good job of controlling her reaction, but you saw a little bit through that facade, and you don't think this was entirely unknown to Elined.
That perhaps changes things, as well as the conversation with, what's his name, Mordecai?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Of course, he'll see what he'll keep up to date with what the Gauntlet wishes to do, but he does wish to seek the investigation in his own manner.
Alright. It is made clear to both you and Elined very explicitly that neither of you, no one, is to spread word that Thomas Chamberlain lives or that Judith is Thomas Chamberlain. They do not want that information to spread at all.
So noted.
And because of that, officially, you and Elined are the only remaining members of the Gauntlet, as far as what the Gauntlet's plans are. But you are free to seek out Elined and ask her about her plans.
Well, he'll certainly do that. See, I assume she'll be raising a force.
That is what she intended to meet with the prince about.
So we'll say the two of you end up connecting at Westminster Palace before Elined, you have a chance to get to the Undercroft of St. Mary's when you run across Robert, and the two of you meet in the hallway, kind of off to the side. The two of you see each other, and the scene is yours.
Are you here for the meeting as well?
That I am. I trust you'll seek to lay siege to this island.
Unless he wishes to redirect me elsewhere. There are a great many threats that need to be dealt with first. Well, not first, but before things get worse.
Indeed. I suppose the prince will be your main way of gathering troops.
Aye.
What do you know of the mercenaries around?
In which sense? There are a great many mercenaries.
There are. And just plots whirling in my mind. Perhaps the coin could be used to fund a large portion of those mercenaries. I suppose the first question would be, what sort of time frame do you seek?
That is largely dependent on the plans of which the prince has, if any. If he does not have a set time schedule for taking down any specific location, then I have a more loose time frame to work with.
If it does indeed turn out to be loose, Perhaps I could secure additional forces for the destruction of the rebels.
If we go out that way, yes, you might want us focused on the mainland.
Hmm.
You heard what was said last time, with the potential allies they have to the... Not to mention the squabble between two of the Covenant princes. Those inquisitors. And likely a great deal of other things we haven't considered yet.
And I suspect if the Inquisitors are dealt with, that would open up the opportunity for more of a focused front on this Isle of Man.
If it is determined to be a significant enough threat by the prince, I personally believe they should be dealt with before things take a turn for the worse.
I would be surprised if the princes decided not to attack the enemy while they are gathered. Do you not agree?
Aye, but another hurdle is that they reside in the city of another prince, and that would be causing a bit of a ruckus in her domain.
Indeed. Do you know much about this prince?
Of Octavia? I know very little about. Most of my knowledge comes from that one time we went to her city, and things I've been told by others that are mere rumors, gossip, that type of thing.
No surprise. She is a very intimidating, if not off-putting, figure.
That is certainly one way of putting it.
Shall we go together to meet with the prince and request forces?
Of course.
I clicked a button and got out of my own game.
Whoopsie. But yeah, Elined's going to go to that meeting with the prince.
Alright. One moment. So the two of you make your way down to the Undercroft St. Mary's. You find at the end of the Undercroft, Ambrose is kind of staring down as Mordecai says something to his side, and Cash is pacing with his arms folded. You also see one other figure, which gives you some pause. Ludovico is in the court as the two of you enter. Ludovico is standing off to the side and comes into view from behind a column. Turning and seeing you, he smiles faintly, nodding in your direction quietly as the two of you
Elined
approach.
will do her best to force a smile.
Robert will give a polite nod in that direction.
And she will approach, curtsying as is customary for her to show the proper respects to the
Mordecai finishes whatever he's saying and steps away. The prince nods to you. Lady Elined, Lord DeVere. You had something you wished to speak with me about.
Aye, that I did.
He turns away from you and looks towards Ludovico. Thank you. That is sufficient. Ludovico smiles and bows with great etiquette before stepping away and looking to each of you in turn as he makes his way out of the Undercroft, seeming content. What is it you bring me?
We know where the rebels are. We know they are hiding enough. Should things fall through with Judith, then would it not be prudent to have a plan B to overtake the island?
I fully expect such arrangements to be made. I will allow Judith to glean what she might and play her part, for as long as there is a part to be played. But that island will be taken, and those traitors will see the sun. I am expecting you to accomplish this.
Of course.
And you, Lord DeVere, what part will you play in this?
What part indeed? The recruitment of troops. Is such a thing needed?
The Covenant collectively can rally between 5 and 7,000 troops. It is unlikely we will need such a force to take the Isle.
Perhaps. How much do we know of the politics of this area?
At this time, the town of Douglas is the only notable settlement on the island. It is small, although there is a fortification there. If indeed they are at the island, it will be from this fortification that they hide. It will be too small to support even a handful of Canaanites, so they will have some need of blood dolls, and many of them. They may be bringing them in. Perhaps you can use that.
Elined stops and ponders for a moment. Can she make a rough estimate of how many would be needed to take the...
How many to take the town?
How many forces to take it, yes.
Sure. You mean intelligence, academics for your military expertise. Standard difficulty is fine. Alright, 2 successes. Given that you know it's a small town, the fortification is likely to be small, but with the assumption that Canaanite defenders will count for many times a normal man, you think around 500 men would sufficiently subdue the town without severely overestimating your needs, and still giving you confidence that you could easily put down any resistance they have.
A healthy estimate to overtake them, and overtake them with relative certainty, would be 500.
He nods once. Fortunately, I can provide you with this retinue from the nearby counties. You will not need to draw from the other Covenant princes. This should expedite things.
And I thank you very much for your generosity in this matter.
Mordecai will see about facilitating the logistics of having these men rallied to where you need them, and having the captains appointed as needed. I hope to hear encouraging results. The sooner this revolt is put down, the sooner we can stabilize England. Put this mess behind us.
And I intend to provide those results. On another matter, do you remember the other individual that came with us? Nicholas Ridley fellow?
I vaguely recall the name.
To both Robert and myself, he has offered his assistance in certain investigation.
The two of you are Gauntlet Lords, equal in standing to at least a primogen of any Covenant city. You may requisition and conscript any Cainite in any Covenant city as needed. If this Nicholas Ridley is needed, ensure he understands his responsibility to the Covenant.
Of course.
Very good.
My thoughts is he seemed more of the crafty sort. He could help Robert in plans that Robert might or may not be may or may not be doing. I am uncertain what he intends to do for his front of this overtaking of the island.
Indeed. I do wonder where they procure such blood dolls from, if the isle does not sustain sufficient population.
Therein lies the question. Likely they will be shipped off from the mainland, on the west coast somewhere. I will leave the details to you. I entrust that the two of you will accomplish this efficiently.
Of course.
If you face any resistance in conscripting this Nicholas Ridley, I'll see that the sheriff puts him in order.
As you say.
I will keep that in mind, but I doubt that will be a problem. He has been compliant so far.
There are some who are compliant until their own danger is at the forefront. But make no mistake, I intend to see this rebellion crushed. The Covenant's will be made through the iron fist of its gauntlet.
Robert will bow at this and turn towards Mordecai. How long do you think it will take?
Can have the forces ready and within the fortnight.
I see.
Shall I rally them here? He turns to look at you, Elined.
Sorry, I was coughing up along there.
He asked you if you would like the 500 men rallying at London or somewhere else.
Well, it would be beneficial to rally them here. The rebels could very well have eyes in London. Of course, this is speculative. I do not know names, nor affiliations. Merely acting with caution.
That is prudent. Perhaps we can rally them elsewhere. I will send for my fastest riders. Time is of the essence. St. Albans north of here should do. Close enough and supportive, but without drawing as much attention, perhaps.
Very well.
This force shall be marching by foot, then.
By horse. It will not be time. If we wish for this force to reach the Isle of Man, better if we could get enough ships.
From where do you seek to procure ships?
Bristol would be closest. Ride to Bristol. Sail from there. It will be faster. If you are going west, Windsor Castle would be more reasonable. And Mordecai looks back to you for confirmation, Elined.
The first one was Bristol, and what was the second one?
It sounds like he's suggesting rallying the forces at Windsor to ride out to Bristol and sailing from Bristol to the Isle of Man.
That should work.
Mordecai nods and bows briefly before turning to leave out the back entrance. Is there anything else you will require for this?
Not on my part, no.
I suspect not at this moment.
Then I will leave you with this last thought. While your treasonous companion may yet live, do not mistake him for what she is: a traitor to the Covenant, to the security of England. If you suspect that Judith's intent is not to provide information on this rebellion, and in fact seems to support it. I will trust that the two of you do what needs to be done.
Robert gives a serious look. So be it.
As you command.
He nods and then waves you away.
Which Robert will bow and take his leave.
Elined will do one final curtsy and do the same.
All right. The two of you depart from the Undercroft and make your way back into Westminster Palace. What are Elined's and Robert's plans now?
It's seeming less likely that Robert will be able to take care of the Inquisitors and make it up to the Isle of Man. He'll be looking at alternatives, perhaps figures he can send in his stead with this armed retinue. From, let's say, the neonate population.
All right. So you want to recruit a coterie of neonates or a single neonate to kind of go as your standard bearer?
I think a coterie would be appropriate in this case.
All right. How do you go about recruiting this coterie? You do it forcefully or with bribes and cajoling? And what do you tell them?
Okay, so compensation would be the easiest. And the story he'll tell them is this group they are to escort a group of soldiers to apprehend and make sure the apprehension goes over smoothly of individuals that seem to have knowledge of our kind.
Do you tell them this is a bishop or his name or...
Assuming that the bishop's guard would have regalia that would, support that, he won't hide this fact from them, because it'll be easy for anyone to figure out.
And their target?
Of course, their target. He'll let them know that as well, the building they will be held at, and he'll... Perhaps he'll. Perhaps he'll. Heather knows the place quite well. Perhaps he'll send her along to, with instructions to report back how everything goes to Cornelius, as well as Robert.
Alright. So just Heather, not Guy?
Guy he'll take with him in this particular case.
Out to the Isle, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Alright, so how again are you recruiting this group? Are you throwing the weight of your status as a Gauntlet Lord behind it?
He can, yeah, sure. I mean, he'll make it obvious to them that there'll be rewards for making sure everything goes smoothly. And that shouldn't be too hard. They have a great force backing them.
Alright. I will take a Charisma Expression roll, and you can add in your dots of status as a Gauntlet Lord. The difficulty here will be 6. Wow. Give me specialties?
For this in particular, Smooth Talker is 1. And also Conversation.
I would say Smooth Talker, so that'd be 7 successes.
Okay.
Yeah, you speak with the authority and the conviction that draws in quite a few from Elysium, and it seems like you have your pick of the litter to choose neonates. Do you distinguish at all by clan or anything, or are you just taking the first 3 that show up? Build your op team.
If he has his pick of clans, he'll look for a more combat-oriented with one that seems to be a level-headed leader. So perhaps Is there any showing from Clan Gangrel?
In Elysium, not really. Unless, you don't necessarily have to go to Elysium, but that's where you get most of the neonates. It's a little bit harder getting Gangrel.
Okay.
And I will say that Robert has enough knowledge of etiquette that an endorsement from a Gauntlet Lord, especially depending on which clan he supports, does say something and will have an indirect impact on the opinions that the city has on that clan and on the Gauntlet. It's kind of like who gets to serve the Gauntlet. It's a status unto itself.
Okay.
And for a Toreador to elevate a Gangrel would definitely draw some eyebrows.
Certainly would.
So most are expecting you to pick high clans.
Well, yes, if there's a a capable Ventru, he'll pick him or her.
Yeah, with 7 successes on your recruitment, I'll say that you could definitely find a Ventru knight to head this.
Okay.
I'll say 2 others.
Another would be a Bruja. And for the last... Any priors?
The only Nosferatu you know spends time in Elysium is Helen. If you ask her for volunteer Nosferatu to join, she will connect you with one, although they're loath to come into Elysium. But she can do it.
If there's one that doesn't have the initiative to be at Elysium, then no.
Or at least not one willing to show themselves, except for her.
Okay.
Which does strike you as a little bit odd, as she's informally a harpy, but there's otherwise really no Nosferatu that ever show up in Elysium here. You've spoken to Apples, to Declan once or twice, but even he seems to be gone from Elysium now.
Very curious.
So you have a Ventru, a Bruja, and one more pick.
Alright, I'll send a Toreador.
Okay. Let me make a note of that. We'll come back to it. Alright, so you give him enough information, this coterie, this Ventru, Bruja, and Toreador, to accompany this group of guards, which is somehow affiliated with the church, to detain a foreign bishop. And it sounds like you've been given, as in the Archbishop gave you a lot of leeway in where to put this bishop. It's expected that he'll be put in prison somewhere. Although if that's Canterbury or London, that sounds like it's been left up to you.
Oh, has it? I'm sure Cornelius will want a chance to interrogate this group. What was Prince Octavia's she told Robert something about dealing with the witch hunters. I can't remember exactly.
In general, her stance was one of caution, and I would say caution is probably her overall sentiment towards the witch hunters. You got the impression she did not want to confront them directly. Although you're not given instruction to take out this entire group, just the bishop. Well, both bishops. The French bishop and the English one, which is hosting him. Of course, neither of them are to be harmed.
Of course.
Just detained.
And of course, Robert will stress this among the neonates, as well as hiding their nature for the city itself will put them on edge, and should they reveal their nature, things will likely go bad for them. So they must maintain self-control.
Okay. So detain them in Canterbury so that Cornelius can get a pick at this Bishop Louis de Poitiers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll have more information on your coterie that you sent out later, but that's considered done. And they will plan on leaving within this fortnight. So very soon.
All right, and Robert will have Heather send out a message to Cornelius once they arrive there
Okay.
about the plan.
That's right. Heather's going with them. All right. And otherwise, Elined, what were the remainder of your plans? Remind me.
Let's say, well, since they're getting removed from that manor, she needs to find someplace else to stay.
I think Judith offered to let you stay at the inn. I think.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
So that's an option for you. But is there anything else you
but
want?
that would raise questions. She has a decent amount of funds with her. She'll try to seek out either renting or purchasing a building for their base of operations since their current one was away. Furious typing.
Yeah, I'm just making some notes here. You definitely have the resources to purchase a new manor.
She's not looking for anything grandiose. She's more interested in if it suits the needs, then it suits the needs. Private enough not to get intruders.
That's easily enough done. You're able to find not exactly a manor like a manse, but a 2-story home with a nice basement. It's a mostly wooden building with kind of a stone framework, and it would be difficult for most people to purchase, but given the recent influx of cash you received from Ragna, it's fairly easy for you to purchase a new home. So you can consider that to be a new haven for you. And as you understand it, your standing orders or plan is to bring these, or rather meet these 500 knights going to Windsor Castle and sailing out of Bristol to the Isle of Man in the next couple weeks.
She will set Gertrude to outfitting the house with decorations.
Which she is very
And-
pleased to do.
And she herself will be... If I go to any stores around here, any map makers, can I find a map of the Isle of Man so I can do any preliminary play?
Absolutely. You end up going to one of the abbeys, and they have one of the copies of the Isle of Man. Specifically, it's the Isle of Man, and really the only settlement there is Douglas. It's barely more than a dot on the map. But you have an idea of the general layout, which is a very basic map.
Does it go over terrain at all?
Very broadly, it tells you where hills and some of the light foresting is. Where some of the more difficult coastal terrain to approach from is for boats trying to port there or dock there.
Alright, so then she'll have a small section of that house, or at least a little office set up in one of the bedrooms they don't use on the second floor.
Sure. You can set up a mini war room up there.
Yes, to overgo these plans.
Alright. And do you bring in Judith or Nicholas into these plans? What do you tell them?
She believes Nicholas would be better suited to helping Robert with whatever Robert is planning. Though, if Robert does follow up on that, that's entirely up to him. She's not his babysitter. She will, however, bring in Robert to these war meetings, since they are working on the same side.
Okay, noted. I'm gonna put a pin in that for a second. And how or do you include Judith on these meetings?
Currently, no, if only because if things get leaked, that could prove disastrous to their attack.
All right. So Judith doesn't know at all when you're leaving or how many men or where they're going. None of that.
She has informed her before that she is currently making a plan. What she does with that is her own.
Alright. And going back to Judith, it's been maybe a few nights since you last heard from Elined, and you haven't heard any more. What are Judith's next steps?
Board the ship for the Isle of Man.
Okay. So your next steps are to leave for the Isle of Man. Elined is still making plans, probably leaving within the next fortnight. Alright. Let us take a break here since we're at the 2-hour mark, and when we come back we will open up a scene with Nicholas, Robert, and Elined in the mini war room to discuss what the final plans are before you all leave.
Alright.
So let us return to Nicholas Ridley. Before we get right into this meeting, you have this 11-year-old street urchin. What are your intentions with him after your initial night? You have a few nights before the man of the house returns.
He has a few samples he intends to collect from him. He's already collected the first, which is the fear of surprise. He also wishes to invoke the fear of pain, the fear of immediate death, and then, finally, the fear of actual death into vials so that he can study them.
Describe what Nicholas does to evoke these fears and how this sets up for the boy. What does it look like for him?
The fear of pain is easy. He's already given the boy actual pain. All he has to do to invoke that fear is to produce the knife again with the threat of using it against him. And he'll take a small sample while the boy is feeling that fear. The fear of impending death will come with a little bit of conditioning on Nicholas's part. As he's holding the boy for a few days, he has plenty of time to sink home the reality that this boy is going to die. And the more certain of that the boy becomes, the more ready he is to collect the sample from that one. Which he does on the third or fourth night. Then finally, the fear of actual death. He is actually going to end up cutting the boy through the major veins and arteries of his neck and collect a sample when he's nearly bled out.
It takes time being this methodical and capturing the specimens at just the right time, at the peak of fear. But being methodical is something you're very used to. And in the end, you have a nice array of small, cork-capped vials of blood that on the outside all appear to be the same, but you know the difference, even by smell. And in the end, you have a nearly exsanguinated, pale-faced boy with multiple deep lacerations to several parts of his body, and quite a bit of blood on the floor as well, in the chair. And your collection. What do you
Before
do?
the boy... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Before the boy is too far gone, fully bled out from the wounds that have been inflicted in his neck, Nicholas will thank him for being the first on what he hopes is a long road of discovery. And he is quite genuine in that thanks. Not that the boy cares, as his lifeblood is flowing out through his neck.
The only response you get are the very quiet gurgles as the last blood seeps or squirts out. You have this corpse in front of you. What do you do with it? With him?
He's going to find a place to get rid of it. Dead bodies are an unnecessary complication, an unfortunate side effect of the important work he's doing. Perhaps he can slip him off the docks into the ocean.
Perhaps. Give me a wits stealth roll. Difficulty 7 to cart off this boy's body and get it into the Thames where it'll feed out. One success. There are many times when you think you're going to be caught with this exsanguinated boy's corpse. You very nearly end up in dire straits when fortune favors you and you manage to dip into the bridge getting into London, and from there you're able to find a spot to dispose the body.
And so he does, without much ceremony. It is only an empty vessel after the soul has fled, and he did witness the things he wanted to witness. He feels no remorse. In fact, it's the gauntlet who's inspired him. And he will seek them out at his first opportunity to tell them the good news.
In fact, you're alerted to the request by the Gauntlet to seek you out, and are actually invited to meet with at least one of the Gauntlet Lords, Elined, at her apparently new home in London on one of these nights. If you accept that.
He will gladly accept the invitation.
Okay. So it's maybe a night or two later when Elined, you and Robert are upstairs in your home. It's still being decorated. Gertrude has been busy at work, but at least this war room is outfitted. There's a good number of maps and a few tomes, your personal game of strategy, and a few other tools that you might find useful for plotting and for planning. The two of you are up there, and you've just gotten together when Gertrude knocks and opens the door, looking in. "My lady, my lord, a guest has arrived." And she opens the door a little bit wider, showing that, indeed, Nicholas Ridley is standing there, leering over her shoulder, perhaps.
Please come in. We have work to do.
He bows slightly, his hands clutched behind his back, and saunters into the room. He looks invigorated, energetic, although his face is still stony. His eyes speak of untold excitement.
And Gertrude closes the door behind her and leaves the three of you together.
He's going to scan the room as a force of habit. Anything out of place that he should worry about.
Yes, you do see there are some books. It looks perfectly symmetrical except for these two books that just look out of place. It's noticeable to you, and it does draw your eye away from the attention of the people.
He strides over there almost without thinking about it to correct the issue.
And Robert, you're here as well.
Thank you for your invitation, he says as he puts the books in order.
But of course.
And thank you for your willingness to cooperate. Now, Robert, for the more intrigue side of this assault, Do you have any plans as of yet?
No. I know precious little of the area.
If it is general information on the area, I did procure a map.
Perhaps studying it would bring something to mind.
So it is an assault that you're planning, then? And he'll stride over to the table to look at the map himself.
That is... We have been tasked with, well, overtaking the Isle of Man.
He turns the map slightly so it lines up with the edge of the table. No chance of diplomacy, then?
This is more of a... Plan B. It is something that the prince would have had done anyway. It's more of a matter of what is necessary.
I can only assume he wishes to remove the Anarch threat.
Precisely.
It would be what I would do.
We have a retinue of about 500 men, and, well, the rebels, the way they're stationed, are getting their blood dolls from elsewhere, from what has been speculated.
I was curious as to how they were sustaining themselves. 500 all mortals, I assume.
I assume the forces are being gathered by the Seneschal.
Ah, yes, the Seneschal. I've heard the news. A new one has been installed, no?
Aye, that it has.
Genevieve Silvers has been here so long, just like an institution. I wonder what went wrong.
Were you not there for it?
I was. And he looks far away for a moment, preoccupied.
Very well then. Can Elined scan this map to find the most advantageous method of approach?
Sure, yeah, perception investigation, difficulty 7. Alright, 2 successes.
Does detail-oriented apply?
I would say so. It's more like 4 successes. So I will say that you get a very near complete picture of approaching this island when you scan it over. The easiest approach, it appears, is from the south, which faces the dock town, or the port of Douglas. It seems like, based on this map, there is a lot of high-rising rock, or perhaps the water is too low where the rock protrudes, and there are just many places around the island where it is very dangerous for ships to sail, and so most paths seem to steer clear of the Isle of Man entirely. But looking at it carefully, you see one other area where it seems like the noted outcroppings of great rock formations opens up in the north. If there was going to be an escape or a second attack from a different side, there is a path through the outcroppings of rocks to the north which would be critical to this. And besides those two entrances, no ship would have much of a hope of entering or exiting the island. Not with the current naval technology.
Alright. We've got two approaches here. We've got a area to the south and an area to the north. It is best to have people on both sides in case they attempt to flee.
You can discern all of that from this map.
Aye. I've been doing this for quite some time.
He nods appreciatively, still looking at the many small lines and marks.
Though, because there are two areas that of approach, that would mean that they could easily have people stationed at both, ready to send a word out should people approach.
No doubt they will have such lookouts.
Unfortunately, this map doesn't... Well, the fort is but a dot here. It doesn't really go over the structure too far in depth. Otherwise, I would have been able to make something more concrete.
I can
But-
understand how difficult it will be to gain reconnaissance.
But I have worked with worse.
Perhaps a way we can secure our landing. I wonder what would be likely trade partners.
I'm uncertain as to their trade partners, but it has been mentioned that they have recently made allies with the Scots, have they not?
Indeed. They notice a force moving. Do you think they would come to help?
I don't know. My thought was more along the lines of if we can't figure out a trade partner to fly the flag of, we can always assume the flag of their newfound allies.
Not impossible. But I think we could probably get a sufficient-sized force. On a trade ship, perhaps. The initial. And clear out the docks, make sure they have no one watching our larger force come in.
Of course.
Looking at the map and thinking of Robert's knowledge of trade, who would be a likely supplier of the Isle of Man? Or just someone who would frequent ships out there?
Sure, give me an intelligence commerce. Standard difficulty. Two successes. Alright. Look at this map again. The most likely, most obvious choices would be Liverpool, so the port connecting to Chester, or Dublin. You think probably, perhaps other ports along the eastern coast of Ireland, but those two are the most prominent that come to mind. Nearby.
Liverpool is likely to have many eyes, considering its size. Is there a smaller one?
A smaller port?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just thinking Liverpool. If it notices troop movements, that would not be ideal.
There are other smaller port towns along the west coast of Wales, like Beaumaris and Caernarvon, up in Anglesey. Just looking at the maps you have available, thanks to Elined's supplying of this war room. There are many other ports that you could use that are lesser known at this time. And it would be reasonable to think that a ship could be coming from one of these ports up to Douglas for trade. Just not very common.
Alright. Robert will, of course, suggest this less likely to be spotted means.
We'd have to go there from Bristol. To the secondary port, I mean.
It seems that will work.
And we are not certain what sort of force we're to expect.
I know enough that 500 men should be enough to take over the fortress with ease.
Those words have preceded so many failures. With ease.
Quite. There are many prominent figures amongst this rebellion. No doubt we could overwhelm them, but say a group of them sought us out. There'd be little to stop them in that case.
You are certain this is the only way?
It is the most efficient way.
Perhaps the most efficient way would be to have the isle overtaken whilst they slept.
That would be a decent tactic, yes, but we'd need a general among the kind that is decent enough to lead on its own.
And that we are in short supply.
At least at the moment, we know not the individuals that are being gathered for this mission.
Very true. Whatever ghoul servants they have, I doubt they will be sufficient to stop our force with proper guidance.
Of course, I will have to go through them and personally vet the ones that are the most capable of doing so once they are gathered.
Very good. This is the plan we wish to go through. And have these soldiers do our work while the sun is out.
This is assuming these men can find them where they sleep.
I suspect just holding the fort until nightfall would provide sufficient, and would make it a great deal easier to already have the defenses fallen.
Very good. An angle I had not considered. Then again, I am not so versed in tactics as the two of you appear to be.
And I am certain your abilities are elsewhere. And for instance, your eyes will be greatly needed. Especially when we first come to the docks. Who knows how one is hiding their eyes?
The prince has suggested an interesting alternative of figuring out where they're getting their blood dolls from and poisoning their supply.
How feasible would it be to track such a thing? It would seem to me exceedingly difficult.
Considering the high volume out of either Liverpool or Dublin, that would give us two at least solid starting points.
So a direct assault or starvation.
Those are the options, yes, but I am more skilled in the direct approach.
I'm afraid I don't like either. Both of them make us too vulnerable.
True enough. Especially if we decide to check out the port of Dublin. Though I do wonder how the politics of taking over Isle of Man would appear to Scotland.
I am fairly certain that Scotland is next on the list of groups to be dealt with, considering they recently allied with the rebels.
Then what would be the worst possible situation in our assault of this island?
The worst possible situation. The Scots are there, getting orders, and we have to take on both the residents that are normally there, and them at the same time, as well as some decent naval retinue, but I doubt they have that. I know the Scottish have a decent navy, but
One must wonder, Nicholas says, turning around and beginning to pace. Why now? For all that the prince has known about these anarchs and their movements across England, why decide to strike them in another country entirely? at this point in time. I admit I'm not extremely politically minded, but it smells fishy to me.
Because the times they knew about their locations beforehand were... say so. There was one case where they happened to be near a location that we were investigating, but I believe that was the only time they happened to be in that general location.
And you don't think it's somehow motivated by revenge? Perhaps this Anath-Nimtet has injured Prince Ambrose's tender sensibilities. But not so much he wishes to become engaged firsthand.
Anath-Nimtet has secrets of the Covenant. If he stays with them for too long, he can give them more information which could prove disastrous.
What exactly could he know? The princes don't even tell each other their plans.
He has been with them for quite some time.
I'm certain he has had resources and contact that would allow him to easily find out secrets. He was a trusted advisor.
Which really shows you never really know who to trust.
All too true.
Well, if you do plan to go through with this, I did offer my assistance. I accede to anything you request.
I personally would like to discover how closely the Scottish Cainites are willing to support this group of rebels.
That is the wild card in this factor. If they act, or if they don't.
How soon do you intend to move?
The forces are due to be gathered in a fortnight. We are to meet them at Windsor. From there, we travel down to where we are due to board the ship, and we head on our way.
Let us see if we can find perhaps if we get lucky in the trade ship that would be heading in that direction from Bristol. That would save a great deal of planning.
If it is indeed a trade ship we are supplied with.
Well, as long as it matches what they would expect.
I, for one, am not quite certain I could miss a deception of that magnitude. We would have to be very convincing indeed.
Yeah, so a trade ship capable of carrying 500 men. Unlikely to make a stop to the Isle of Man, I think.
Well, 2 ships, one to take up the north and the other to approach from the south.
I'll take an intelligence plus. Oh, there's really no. I didn't ever give a seamanship, but we'll just go with alertness for now. Standard difficulty. Without being a captain of a ship, you might just know things. Alright, 4 from Elined.
What difficulty? Standard?
Standard, fine. 1 from Robert. 4 from Nicholas. Upon thinking about it, most of you realize, especially Nicholas and Elined, ships in this time are not very large. The cog is the most common, and it's a fairly small ship. And most crews of any size have to use multiple ships, so 500 men could easily go on 10 to 20 cogs, depending on the size of the cog. And the crew on it already.
Unless we pack them like fish in a barrel, I doubt we could carry so many.
And 10 to 20 cogs would certainly be too large of a group for simple trade.
And then we simply keep the main force back while we make sure the docks are secured.
Perhaps we can come up with a suitable distraction.
What do you have in mind?
Only the inkling of an idea at this point. What is it these anarchs desire most?
I
Not
suppose that
something.
depends on who you ask.
That is not something I've questioned myself too deeply on.
I should think they want what all rebels want. At least going by the history of such things. A voice. To know that they are heard. Perhaps we can engage a diplomatic angle after all, but not in a true attempt to make peace. Merely to draw their eyes elsewhere, while we plot our gambit.
I'd imagine any diplomatic meeting would be on their terms.
And I am almost certain that any forces visiting their home base is going to be met with opposition from.
However, if we do find out who is shipping blood to them, that could give us some leverage to negotiate over.
It's a damn sight better than a full-on assault they'll see coming for miles. Tell me, are you familiar with the legend of the Trojan horse?
Of course I am. It gets presented as a gift, and then once inside, they proceeded to leave said horse and slaughter everyone's.
Perhaps we could arrange such a gift.
It would have to be very convincing.
We'll give them the one thing they certainly need. Blood. But blood perhaps tainted with some adulterant. The essence of poppy, perhaps, to dull their senses. Not unlike the idea of poison you first mentioned, but much harder to detect.
Then I shall have to trust your wisdom on this. I do not know much of poisons.
It is merely an idea, he says with an offhand gesture. You are the tactician.
It is an idea, yes. is more of a matter of how long would it take to obtain the information of the supplier. It has been expressed to us that time is of the essence.
Yes, but our own perception of time is much different than those who are doomed to die.
The traders have been very much on the move. Unless this is their main fortress, I suspect they'll be likely to continue wreaking havoc elsewhere.
If Prince Ambrose's main motivation is what Enough and Ted can tell them, did he not consider that perhaps this Setite revealed all the information he had immediately as payment for his protection?
And that's why he wants to wipe out everyone. Any negotiation we make with the traitors will no doubt be broken, and I am certain they know of this if enough Nemtet indeed gave them something very valuable.
No matter which road we take, I fear the dangers might far outweigh the benefits.
Yes, but as the sword of the covenant, that existence is our job.
Certainly, taking over the Isle by force would be the best option. To do it subtly is the difficult part.
I won't venture to say impossible. They've chosen their fortress wisely. Even I, a layman, can see that.
500 men is reserved for a night assault, yes? How many do you think it would take to hold the fortress by day?
She'll do some calculations in her head, and can I roll?
Sure, another intelligence academics, standard difficulty. Alright, so that's four successes. From what you understand, Douglas is a very small town, numbering in the hundreds, less than 1,000 certainly. You will take casualties from an attack, but with 500 men, you think you could hold the town pretty confidently, unless they had some force disproportionate to the size of the island. During the day, it shouldn't be difficult with what you have.
It should not be difficult with what we already have.
Very good. The only issue is going in blind. I would not be surprised if they already knew of troop movement somehow.
I would not be surprised either.
At the very least, we've come to a consensus that proper planning is key.
Precisely. That is why I have started planning long before the forces were gathered.
Have you now?
We are here in this room, are we not?
Ah, I thought you spoke of something else.
No, I did not know of their location before the debacle.
Very well then. Shall we decide on a course of action, considering all the possibilities?
Half our forces to the south, half our forces to the north.
Any initial attempts to scout or blind their eyes?
Any attempts to scout will be seen coming from quite a ways off.
That goes back to our disguise, a merchant ship. One that would be expected.
Again, with that many ships, disguising as a merchant vessel might not be the most plausible. I know of scarce few locations that receive upwards of 20 ships from one company in one day.
No, I do not speak of in disguising our whole force. How much visibility does the fort were attempting to take half of the coastlines.
That is an excellent question. Is that something she'd know?
What was the question? How good is the fort at seeing the coastline?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been to Douglas, Elined?
I do not believe so.
The map you have puts Douglas at the port, obviously, and your crude understanding of where it looks like the fortress is located, it looks like it faces southwards towards the dock, outwards. Like that's where the fortification is. Although it's not clear how good of a vantage it has. There isn't enough on like how good the hills or ridges are there. It definitely faces the coast. I'm just not sure how much of it is visible.
It seems like it faces towards the south, but again, we are limited by the tools of which we have.
Can Robert, try to come up with a cunning way of, At least...
Sorry.
Maybe I won't ask for a roll yet. Okay.
If it is indeed facing south, we could potentially blindside them from the north, but that could very well just drive them into whatever ships they had at their disposal. It'd only be a decent option if we had ships that were more capable of combat, should it come to that. But if we take it from the south, though it would be more difficult, it would ensure that they wouldn't have the potential of running to their ships and fleeing.
I just wonder if sailing straight from Bristol is our first mistake. Perhaps we should set up somewhere closer. Someplace it would be easier to hide 500 men until the moment of decisive action.
While you guys continue to plan, I am gonna switch over to Judith since it has been a while since we had a scene with her. So feel free to continue planning in Discord chat if you wish while we transition over and catch up with Judith.
Who is still here?
Excellent. Judith, by the time this meeting that they've all been having begins, you have long since been on your way, traveling out with the intention, I believe, of going to the Isle of Man yourself.
Yep.
So it is in early January of 1456 when you, on board a small cog ferrying you out, you awaken one evening aboard this cog and are alerted that you have arrived at the port of Douglas. Did you bring anyone with you, Kazim or otherwise?
Nope.
Okay.
Her and her alone.
So your scene is that you're below deck on this cog which has ferried you over. It's a merchant vessel that was planning on making a trip there anyway, and you were able to buy your way on. So it must be beginning of the evening, and you've ostensibly arrived in the port of Douglas.
She will gather what little she brought with her, which is not much. Sword, maybe a change of clothes or two, and disembark.
Going above deck, you see there are a couple other ships. The dock here in Douglas is relatively small. Although large enough to accommodate the Von Danzig, it's not presently here. There are a few other cogs docked here. And you begin making your way back into the town of Douglas, up to the fortifications and the gates. And it seems like you're let in without much need for explanation, even though it's in the evening and you're coming from the dock at a little bit after the hours most people would come through. The guards seem to open the gate for you, and you're let inside into the relatively quiet town of Douglas. Where does Judith mean to go, or who does she hope to find?
She's hoping to find literally any familiar faces. But she's definitely going to look around to see if she can pick out anyone paying way too much attention to her.
As you make your way into the town and past this kind of gatehouse attached to the stronghold which overlooks the dock, you notice someone else who's been noticing you making his way over. It looks kind of like a swashbuckling kind of man, large, oversized breeches, a cutlass, leather jerkin. You think you may have seen him before when you were here briefly. You're the one, aren't you?
That depends who's asking. She'll rest a hand on the hilt of her blade.
He kind of raises up a hand slowly. I recognize you. You were invited here by, Helen. She's not here now. A couple others are.
Who's in charge?
Jack.
She grins a bit. I'd dearly love to speak to him.
That's a first. I ain't had many who want to speak to Timbers, but he's this way. He turns around, heading back towards the stronghold.
And she'll follow.
Alright. You follow this man, looks like some kind of sailor of some kind, up into the small fortress which attaches this gatehouse and overlooks the dock. You're led up a spiral staircase into a small stone block room. It's very modest and Spartan. It looks like there's a weapon rack at the far end of the wall. When you enter this chamber, there's a table with a few papers, some very simple chairs. It looks very cheap and purposeful, very pragmatic in here. Nothing here is without purpose or decoration. You see this big hulking man talking to a couple other men. A large axe leaning against the table. He stands up, looking past them to you. He kind of smacks them away to usher them to go away. And they do so. The man who led you up here doesn't say anything, he just departs. Well, look who it is.
Your reputation doesn't do you justice.
Well, yours does. I know exactly who you are.
Well, hopefully it's all true, at the very least.
I've heard some concerning things from the mainland. What brings you here?
Anaf Nemtet.
His eyes narrow a bit. What about him?
I claim right of vengeance.
He sighs. You can see his fangs. DeFore, get down here. He kind of calls up. At the far end of the room, there's an opening. You can hear some wooden creaks, perhaps stairs. You see Robert DeFore, who briefly raises his eyebrows when he sees you. I don't expect to see you here.
I didn't expect you to be harboring the man who killed Cormac, but these nights are full of surprises, aren't they?
He looks obviously uncomfortable when you bring that up. Unfortunate turn of events there. A very complex scenario. Would that Ellen were here to explain it better than I. Jack kind of folds his very large arms as he looks back to you. I had the same thought when he showed up here. At Ellen, she said some words which made sense. As gratifying as it would have been to split the worm in half. He has worth to the cause. Powerful weapon against them.
He would have told you anything. You were his only hope of solace from the blood hunt called upon him.
If I was still younger into the night, I might have cut him down myself. But I've heard his story. Sounds like a lot of bad things happening all at once.
I would have single combat.
I'm afraid that's not going to be possible.
He is a cancer. He will whisper whatever honeyed words he needs to into whichever ears will hear him to preserve his unlife, so that he can use that tool to further his own aims. Only a fool would trust him.
I have no intention of trusting him, but he is a weapon that can be used.
If you think you'll be using a Setite for your own aims, you really are a fool.
Setite or no, he has already done more damage to the Covenant in his time there than, arguably, perhaps the rest of us combined.
Of course, for his own purposes.
I care not what his purposes are. If they align with ours, we are all in agreement.
He'll use you until you no longer suit him, and then he'll cast you off and trade you in for something better.
You wish to slay him, I think for the wrong reasons.
He killed a cop. How is that the wrong reason?
He kind of looks over to Jack Timbers. That's why I wish Ellen were here. He has explained this situation at length to us. There was a individual he was hunting. Seems he had no intention or expectation that the Gauntlet Lords would be there, or that they would participate so passionately against him in defense of these others.
Did he tell you who these others were?
A Cappadocian elder and some... he would not go into great detail about the other, except that it was some great enemy of his kind.
And then that, the Giovanni were his tool.
It is a regrettable loss that Cormac fell needlessly against what could have been an ally for all. We cannot fault this individual for goals entirely divorced from our own rebellion here. He has use to us, so we must not get emotional about this. We cannot afford that.
One way or another, he'll taste my steel.
Robert DeFore steps forward slowly. He has use for now. If you are so bent on fulfilling your passion.
He is a threat to all of England. Ask Rothschild.
He looks confused when you say that name.
She can't deny at Jack.
He seems to exchange glances with Robert Dufour, also unsure.
A prior, formerly the sheriff of Chester, I believe.
The name is perhaps familiar. Why do you value his information so?
Because it was his information that directed me to find you in the first place.
Priors know many things they should not.
Put this a different way. Jack, in all your time in London, did you happen to know a prior, tall, willowy fellow, kept to the shadows often?
More than one. Annoying bastards. Can never keep track of them.
I expect there might be one that stands out more than others. And she'll give the best description she could from her interaction the other night. Or, well, several nights ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like Tristan, while he was still making appearances to other people. He was a Nosferatu primogen. But even back when I was still a lapdog to the Covenant, he grew more and more quiet, removed. Whoever this Rothschild is, it's because he knows things about our location. I'm sure he has some kind of agenda, just like the rest of them. How did you know that the Nothnam Tet was here?
This Tristan told me.
We've never been endorsed or supported by Tristan. He looks back to Jack. Why would he offer this to you?
As I said, because Nothnam Tet is a cancer and a threat to all of England. And he will turn you away from your aims and towards his own. His precise words were something to the effect of, if I wish to see this cause survive, he must die.
Tristan was a respected elder in London, even my time there. Perhaps you are playing his game.
Perhaps. But I felt the sting of this creature's touch. Indirectly, of course. Metaphor.
You are too close to this. You should have the age to know better. We cannot afford to be sentimental. And if you must, at least delay it long enough for us to see some victory here, while we can use him.
If I am old enough to know better, then he is old enough to play you. you would have a better chance of using Ambrose.
Let us consider that then. Anofnim Tet plays us to his own ends, while they coincide with our own, while you are played by this Nosferatu Elder, which coincides with your own ends. Emotional as they may be, which is the greater evil? That the Anarchs succeed and help this serpent, or that you get your vengeance and perhaps fulfill whatever this Elder's goal is?
He asked nothing.
Did that not?
Only that this creature die. And no, I would have expected to be asked for something in return. The fact that someone I need to see turned to ash facilitated the sharing of information from a prior seems rather in keeping with priors.
And he asked for nothing.
Only that I see him dead.
He again exchanges glances, incredulous with Jack. I am sorry, my friend. I cannot allow you to destroy Anofnim Tet, not while I may aid our cause.
What have I told you? There was a threat on the horizon.
A threat? What kind of threat?
The kind I'll be happy to tell you about. Immediately before single combat with Anofnim Tet. If I die, you keep your prize, as well as the knowledge of incoming potential problems. If I live and he dies, you can do with me as you will afterwards.
Jack Timbers shakes his head. It's a terrible deal.
Only for me.
Neither of you needs to die. But if you have information that could save Anarch lives, you should tell.
I should. And I would be happy to. But blood demands blood, Jack.
You don't have to tell me about that. I've lost plenty to them, serving them for long enough. And all I'm seeing is the same damn thing. This Nosferatu has got you wrapped around his finger.
All he gave me was a location. I would have sought him out, regardless.
I bet he knew that too.
Anofnim Tet's head is mine. Tristan merely facilitated it.
Perhaps you'd be willing to wait until Elined could explain this better than either of us.
I don't know that you have that kind of time.
Then best that you buy us that time. Until perhaps cooler heads may prevail.
I don't know that I can do that. You see, Thomas Chamberlain is dead.
Yeah, we heard about that too.
I thought you might have.
We were hoping it was a sign of greater commitment, not less.
Initially it was. And then I heard a snake slithered onto the Isle of Man.
Well, we can debate this till the sun comes up. But the answer remains, you will not see an Tet. And if you won't see reason, I cannot allow you to remain in this fortress. Or this island. We gave you free leave when you first met, without any commitment. We would offer you that to you again, even as much as you know. It's a sign of good faith. Or, you may tell us what the threat is, wait for Elined to arrive, and perhaps then, you'll have a more satisfactory answer to all this. What say you?
When is she due back?
Within the week. That's why we're gathering here.
We might have that time. Just.
He nods a couple of times. Jack seems to untense himself. And you are willing to agree to wait for a parley?
We'll see. For now, I've made my desires and my bargaining tools readily of note to both of you.
It seems at the moment we're in an impasse until something changes. What if you are willing to at least wait until Elined arrives? You may stay here. Sup from the cattle and show you where we keep them. For obvious reasons, you won't be seeing much of him during your stay.
I hadn't expected to, all things considered. But I expect to, eventually.
Very good. I'll show you the quarters and the feeding. He looks over to Jack and nods and then starts walking past you back the way you came.
She's going to take the Ankh pendant that she was given originally by Ellen and slam it hard down into the table, trying to sink it tip first into the wood.
That causes Robert Dufour to stop and turn, and to force Jack to look over as well.
She doesn't say a word and just turns on her heel. You were saying?
Your quarters are down here. After a few more moments, he turns and returns to walking back down the stairs.
She'll follow.
Alright. Then at the sight of you following after, leaving this Ankh stabbed into the bare wooden table, the scene will fade, and we will end it here and pick it up again next week.
I thought you were going to be out of town next week.
Oh, that's right. In 2 weeks, or let's see, not next week, not the other one. In 3 weeks.
All right.
Unfortunately.
All right.
So 700 experience all around.
Yay.
Yay.
Guys are loaded on experience. 1 experience all around. We'll do some entertaining role players. We'll start with Sarah.
I'm going to give it to Robert for the change in trying to be more tactically minded.
Cool. 1 to Robert. Robert, how about you?
I probably missed a good bit of the early things that happened, so the stuff at the end with Judith, yeah, I would say that would get my vote.
Cool. And Judith?
I'm going to give it to Elined. Taking point, making plans, and being fairly fluid about it.
Yeah. A lot of plans up in the air. Sorry to cut you guys off. I just wanted to give Judith some screen time in the end.
Nah, it's fine. We were going around in circles there for the last 20 minutes anyway.
We were, yeah.
And Nicholas.
I'm going to go for Elined as well. For Planorama.
Cool. Great. Great game. Alright, well, I'm sorry for the hiatus, but we will be back, and I'm looking forward to getting back.
Such is life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, cool. Have a good night, guys. See you around.